Hello all, this video will continue with now physiology. Reflex activity. It is a protective mechanism in which there is a response to the peripheral nervous stimulation without a consciousness. Reflex arc and its components. They contain a receptor and afferent nerve or sensory nerve, the center and the effector nerve or the motor nerve and the effector organ. Classification of reflexes based on inborn or acquired. They are unconditioned and conditioned reflex. Inborn is unconditioned and acquired is conditioned reflex. Based on synapse, they are monosynaptic reflex and polysynaptic reflex. In monosynaptic reflex, they have single synapse in their reflex arc. Example, stretch reflex is monosynaptic reflex. And polysynaptic reflex, they have more than one synapse in their reflex arc. Example, flexor reflexes or withdrawal reflexes are example. Now somatic reflex and visceral reflex. Somatic reflex arise from the skeletal muscle and visceral reflex arise from the smooth muscles, cardiac muscles and visceral organs, visceral muscles. On clinical basis, they are superficial reflex and deep reflex. Now we'll see superficial reflex. These are reflexes that are elicited from the surface of the body. Examples are corneal reflex. The stimulus is irritation of the cornea and the response is blinking of eyes. Conjunctival reflex. The stimulus is irritation of the conjunctiva and the response is blinking of the eye. Pharyngeal reflex. The stimulus is irritation of the pharyngeal mucosa and the response is gagging. So it is also known as gag reflex. Abdominal reflex. The stimulus is striking of the abdominal wall and the response is the contraction of the abdominal muscle and movement of the umbilicus towards the site of stroke. Cremasteric reflex. It is the strike on the inner aspect of thigh and the response is the elevation of testicles. Plantar reflex. The stimulus is stroking the sole laterally. Response is plantar flexion and adduction of toes. Deep reflexes, also known as tendon reflexes or jerks. These are reflexes elicited from deeper structures beneath the skin like tendons. Now jaw jerk. The stimulus is tapping on the middle of the chin of a partially open mouth and the response is closure of the mouth. Biceps jerk. The stimulus is tapping on the biceps tendon and the response is flexion of the forearm. Triceps jerk. The stimulus is tapping on the triceps tendon and the response is extension of the forearm. Supinated jerk or radial periosteal reflex. The stimulus is tapping on the stylar process of the radius. The response is supination and flexion of the forearm. Knee jerk or patellar tendon reflex. The stimulus is tapping on the patellar ligament and the response is extension of the leg. And now is ankle jerk or also known as Achilles tendon reflex. Stimulus is tapping on the Achilles tendon and the response is plantar flexion of the foot. Now visceral reflexes are elicited from the visceral organs. They are pupillary reflexes, oculocardiac reflexes and baroreceptor reflex. Pupillary reflex, they are light reflex and accommodation reflex. In light reflex, they are direct light reflex where the constriction of the pupil on the same eye where the torchlight is showed, and in indirect light reflex, the constriction of the pupil on the opposite side. Accommodation reflex, when eye is focused on a distant object, when another object is brought near the eye, the focus shifts from the distant to the near object brought. The changes during accommodation reflex are constriction of the pupil, convergence of eyeball and increase in anterior curvature of the lens. Oculocardiac reflex is the heart rate decreases when there is pressure in the eyeball. The baroreceptor reflex is the regulation of blood pressure. Now we'll see pathological reflexes. They include Babinski reflex, Clonus, and pendular movements. Babinski reflex or abnormal plantar reflex. It states that there's dorsiflexion of the great toe and fanning out of other toes. This happens in human lesion and in infants. Clonus is the series of rapid and involuntary repeated jerky movements when eliciting a deep reflex. Types: ankle clonus and patellar clonus. Ankle clonus, the contraction of the calf muscles causing dorsiflexion of the foot, and in patellar clonus is clonic contractions of the quadriceps muscle. This clonus occurs due to the pyramidal tract lesion where the hypertonicity of muscles occur. In human lesion, we'll see pendular movements. Unlike clonus, these are slow pendular movements on eliciting a deep reflex. Example, in cerebellar lesion, the leg moves forwards and backwards several times